Maritime forests of the southern Atlantic coast are in a narrow, discontinuous band on the barrier islands and coastal mainland from North Carolina to Florida. Here is a map showing the names of all of the islands off the coast of the southern Atlantic coast that contain maritime forests, and it also shows the adjacent mainland. This region has a humid subtropical climate, so it has warm, humid summers and mild, moderately cold winters. So in summertime, the daytime temperatures can exceed 30 degrees Celsius or about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And in winter, the average temperatures range from 10 degrees Celsius to 15 degrees Celsius, with some nights below 0 degrees. The precipitation in this area is abundant and well distributed throughout the year, with an annual average between 1,200 and 1,500 millimeters. The rainfall is more intense in the summer month due to the influence of storms and hurricanes. This region presents high humidity. The region has relatively high humidity levels, often exceeding 80%, especially during the summer. Another major influence of the climate of this region is hurricane season. This proceeds from June through November, with peak activity between August and October. The hurricanes and tropical storms can cause flooding events in the wetlands. Winds and sea breezes influence moderating temperatures, especially in the areas closest to the coast. And there are some seasonal variability in the temperatures, although they are moderately consistent. Extreme events such as intense storms and fluctuations in sea level can significantly impact these wetlands. Maritime forests are located in a hydrological transition zone between terrestrial and marine ecosystems. They're characterized by their proximity to the sea level. The hydrological dynamics of these forests depend on a complex balance between the groundwater, saline water infiltration, and surface runoff. The influence of tides can extend inland, generating periodic fluctuations in the water table that affect both water availability and soil salinity. The hydrological regime is highly conditioned by the interaction between the topography and the capacity of the sandy soils to retain and drain water. During high rainfall events or coastal storms, soil saturation increases significantly, leading to temporary water storage in the rhizosphere zone. This saturation not only influences nutrient availability, but also affects the distribution of plant species, favoring those adapted to intermittent hypoxia conditions. Saline intrusion, especially during storm surges and hurricanes, can lead to the infiltration of seawater into the surface aquifer. This generates a salinity gradient that not only alters the floristic composition of the forest, but also impacts the structure and function of the soil and microbial communities. In the long term, rising sea levels and increased frequency of storms can substantially modify the hydrology of these ecosystems, shifting the boundaries of maritime forests and transforming them into saline wetlands or salt marshes. Maritime forests of the southern Atlantic coast are mainly based on geological formations such as fossil dunes and the ancient sandbars. These elevated topographic features facilitate efficient drainage, preventing excess accumulation of water on the surface. However, these same formations, being highly permeable, can allow the intrusion of saline water during storms and high tide events, which alters both the availability of fresh water and the salinity of the soil. On the other hand, the soils that characterize these forests are predominantly sandy, with a texture that makes it difficult to retain water and nutrients. The natural acidity of the soil, together with its low organic content, creates a challenging environment for vegetation, favoring species that are adapted to conditions of low fertility and fluctuations in water availability. These soil conditions, together with the hydrological influence of tides and rainfall, configure a highly specialized ecosystem that is resilient to extreme environmental changes. Water quality and biogeochemistry. Unique aspects of the water quality and biogeochemistry is that the water quality of maritime forests of this region presents a peculiar mixture of freshwater runoff and saline waters from marine intrusion. This interaction creates a saline gradient that varies both spatially and temporally, affecting the biogeochemical cycles and the nutrient availability in the soil. The main water inputs in this ecosystem come from direct precipitation, subsurface flow, surface runoff, and seawater infiltration during high tides or storm events. These water sources combine to create a complex hydrological matrix that influences soil composition and vegetation. During storm surge events, large volumes of saline water can infiltrate the upper soil horizons, affecting water quality in these systems. pH and nutrients. The pH of the soil in the maritime forest tends to be acidic, generally between 4.5 and 6.5, due to the decomposition of organic matter and the presence of acidic soils derived from coastal sands. The levels of available nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus are limited due to the low retention capacity of sandy soils. However, periodic flooding with saline water can provide certain micronutrients such as potassium and magnesium, which are transported by the tides. However, high saline content can inhibit the uptake of other essential nutrients by plants. Soil types. The predominant soils in these forests are sandy, coarse-textured, and have a low water and nutrient retention capacity. In addition, they often have a layer of decomposing organic matter on their surface, which can accumulate in small topographic depressions. These soils are highly permeable, facilitating both drainage and nutrient leaching. In areas closer to saltwater, soil can become salinized, contributing to an edaphic environment that can only be tolerated by species adapted to conditions of salt stress and acidity. Together, these biogeochemical factors and water quality determine the biodiversity and structure of the maritime forest, making these ecosystems unique and fragile areas with high resilience to environmental fluctuation, but vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. A maritime forest is an inclusive term that can be used to describe any woody vegetation growing near any of the world's oceans, but these forests specifically often exhibit canopy. And the maritime shrub community has a height limitation resulting from the salt aerosol impact and have been distinguished from other types of coastal forests. Forested wetlands of the southern Atlantic coast of the United States are home to a rich diversity of plant species well adapted to the unique conditions of this region. Dominant plant species include live oak, the loblolly pine, and an understory of plants that can tolerate salinity and shade. The variation in the composition of these communities is influenced by environmental factors such as soil salinity, flood frequency, and the water table. These environmental conditions change depending on the proximity to saltwater and affect the distribution of specialized species. However, many of these plants face threats due to urban development, rising sea levels, and climate change, which has put several endemic and endangered species at risk, mainly due to habitat loss and disruption of natural hydrological patterns. The forested maritime wetlands of the southern Atlantic coast of the United States are a refuge for a wide range of fauna that adapt to the fluctuating environmental conditions. Deer and raccoons use these habitats as a foraging and shelter area, while waterfowl and migratory species find these wetlands a key place for feeding and nesting. Unique species, such as the snail-eating hawk, depend on the presence of specific snails found in wetlands, underscoring the importance of maintaining these ecosystems. Additionally, the loblolly pine, a keystone species, provides structural support for nests and is a food source. Food webs in these wetlands are intricate, where predators such as snakes and birds of prey regulate the populations of small mammals and insects, creating an ecological balance that is essential to the ecosystem health. Connections with other communities in ecological dynamics. Maritime forested wetlands are not only self-sustaining ecosystems, but also serve as ecological bridges between diverse non-wet communities. During seasonal migrations, these wetlands act as essential refuges for a variety of migratory species, especially birds. For example, waterfowl such as waders and other species of ducks and herons use these wetlands as a resting and feeding site during their migratory paths along the coast. These ecosystems also serve as nursery grounds for many fish and crustaceans. The intertidal area near the estuaries provide nutrient-rich habitats for larvae and fry of diverse marine species such as lobster, or menhaden, which depend on these protected and resource-rich environments for their early development. The interdependence of wetlands with these terrestrial and aquatic communities demonstrates their crucial role in the connectivity of coastal landscapes. Maritime forested wetlands also support coastal biodiversity by providing an ideal environment for species such as carapace, saltwater minnows, and molluscs such as oysters, which take advantage of the nutrient-rich water. In addition, the dense vegetation of these wetlands acts as a natural barrier between coastal erosion, protecting other nearby terrestrial and marine communities from the destructive effects of storms and high tides. Wetlands are a crucial source of primary production, generating large amounts of organic matter through photosynthesis of aquatic and terrestrial plants. These plants, such as scripus, rushes, and typha, foxtail, are especially productive in generating biomass that decomposes in the soil and water, releasing essential nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon. This decomposition process feeds a wide range of organisms from small invertebrates to fish and birds that feed on the organic matter at different stages of decomposition. Organic matter generated in wetlands is also transported to nearby coastal and marine ecosystems through runoff, particularly during seasonal flooding or rainfall. The combination of leaves, decomposed roots, and detritus from aquatic plants such as Zostera marina seagrass provide valuable sources of nutrients to sustain life in the aquatic system. These nutrients enrich coastal waters, which favor the growth of phytoplankton and zooplankton, especially for the marine food chain. In addition, sediments rich in organic matter act as a substrate for the development of mollusks, crustaceans, and other benthic species, which increases the productivity of the adjacent marine ecosystem. As wetlands contribute to the nutrients and organic matter of the coastal waters, they also influence the aquatic biodiversity. The presence of organic matter and nutrients in the water favors the growth of fish species such as cod or sea bass, which can feed on the zooplankton and small invertebrates. In addition, the colonies of mollusks, such as oysters, form reef habitats that in turn provides shelter for other marine species. Without these inputs of organic matter, the nearby marine ecosystems would lose much of their capacity to support biodiversity, showing the essential roles that wetlands play in the health of coastal waters and the conservation of marine fauna. This infographic shows the interaction between terrestrial and marine ecosystems. These interactions are critical to the maintenance and health of both environments. The dynamics between these ecosystems not only benefit the species that inhabit them, but also optimize the ecosystem services that they provide. For example, terrestrial systems such as forests and grasslands play a crucial role in regulating the water cycle, which directly affects the nearby marine ecosystems. Sediments and nutrients generated in the terrestrial ecosystems are transported to nearby bodies of water, providing resources necessary for the growth and development of marine species. Likewise, marine ecosystems such as coral reefs and seagrass beds and seagrass meadows affect the physical conditions of the water and the seafloor, creating protected environment for the species and improving the water quality. The interdependence of these ecosystems is also seen in how changes or alterations of one system can trigger a chain of events that affect others. For example, the loss of vegetation in coastal areas due to deforestation or pollution can alter the water quality, negatively affecting the marine ecosystems such as coral reefs or wetlands. In effect, These effects, in turn, impact species that rely on these habitats for food and reproduction. Therefore, conserving the connectivity between terrestrial and marine ecosystems is essential to preserve biodiversity and the ecosystem services offered by these interconnected systems. The destruction or deterioration of one ecosystem can compromise the stability and functionality of the neighboring ecosystem, highlighting the importance of integrated, sustainable management of natural resources. Maritime forested wetlands have suffered a large number of impacts due to human activities. Urban and agricultural expansion have modified water flows, which has altered the capacity of wetlands to regulate flooding and store carbon. Water pollution caused by excess use of fertilizers and chemicals has degraded both water quality and aquatic biodiversity, affecting key species in the food chain. In addition, forest fires exacerbated by the alteration of the natural fire regime due to human activity have changed the vegetation structure and species composition. Direct impacts include activities such as dredging of coastal areas for port construction and excavation of natural resources, which destroy crucial habitats for local fauna. Overexploitation of species such as mollusks and fish has affected the ecosystem's food webs, reducing biodiversity and productivity of wetlands. These changes have compromised the ability of wetlands to provide vital ecosystem services, such as regulating the water cycle and protecting biodiversity. Coastal development, including the removal of forested areas, has had a devastating impact on the unique ecosystems and species that inhabit the marine forests of the United States coastal wetlands. Clearing trees and converting these habitats reduces shelter and resources available to migratory birds that rely on wetlands during their long journeys, as well as to terrestrial animals that use them as feeding and breeding areas. Due to limited gene flow between the mainland and these coastal islands, many species have become specifically adapted to these isolated ecosystems, making them extremely vulnerable to habitat loss. In addition, rising sea levels could inundate both the islands and the adjacent mainland areas, leading to a complete disappearance of these unique ecosystems. Climate change has also increased the frequency and intensity of storm events, putting additional pressure on these already fragile habitats. As temperature changes, so do the plant species that can survive in these areas, and the impact of these storms on the marine ecosystems are changing. An example of this is the expansion of mangroves towards the north with global warming, which displaces native species and alters the dynamic of the coastal ecosystems. The sum of these factors threatens the irreversible loss of biodiversity in these regions. Maritime forests face serious threats from rising sea levels, storms, and the intrusion of salt-tolerant species. On barrier islands, these forest communities must withstand the direct impact of tropical storms, hurricanes, and low-pressure systems from the northeast, while mainland forests are better protected by these islands. In a study analyzing these forests on the east coast of Virginia, two geographically distinct areas, one on the mainland and one on a barrier island, were measured over 2 time periods, separated by 15 and 21 years, respectively. The goal was to determine whether these forests are natural succession trajectory or are disintegrating due to rising sea levels and exposure to storms. Forests on the island were expected to show greater decay than those on the mainland, evidenced by a reduction in the tree basal area and a decreased species richness. The results showed that the maritime forest at Savage Neck Dunes, located on land at higher elevation, maintained the dominance of species such as Acer rubrum, Pinus taeta, and Liquidambra styraciflua, although a 14% reduction in the total number of individuals was recorded. In contrast, on Paramore Island, 33% of the previously forested plots were converted to grassland, and 33% were lost due to erosion, remaining as ghost forests on the shore or disappearing into the ocean. In the plots that still maintained trees in 2018, a change in shrub dominance was observed. The previously dominated species by the shrub Morella cerifera. In addition, only 46% of the original trees and shrubs remained, and the basal area was reduced by 84%, with a predominance of shrubs in the remaining forested areas. The differences in resilience of these maritime forests can be explained by their geographic position and elevation relative to sea level. While mainland forests showed a natural succession towards larger, less dense trees without a significant shift in species dominance, the forests on the barrier island underwent rapid changes within 2 decades, with a complete loss of forest communities that were transformed into grasslands. This suggests that barrier islands are experiencing an accelerated change in their community composition due to constant exposure to storms and rising sea levels. These findings highlight the vulnerability of maritime forests on barrier islands to erosion and saltwater intrusion, which could lead to the complete disappearance of these forest communities. Furthermore, shifts in species composition towards more salt-tolerant shrubs, such as Morella cerifera, indicate a possible transition towards shrub-dominated states before a complete loss of woody communities in these coastal areas. These ecosystems, if not protected, would completely disintegrate, leaving both islands and adjacent continental coast exposed to the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. To improve the protection of maritime forested wetlands of the southeastern United States, further research into local biodiversity and the ecological process that enable their function is crucial. Although some restoration efforts are underway, such as reintroduction of native plant species and the improvement of water quality, results are still limited in some areas. Actions include the restoration of degraded wetland habitats, restoration of natural hydrological flows, and the management of invasive vegetation. Efforts are also underway to purchase land and create protected areas, helping to conserve these vulnerable ecosystems from further threats. In terms of achievements, improvements in water quality and the recovery of species has been documented in some areas, although full restoration remains a challenge. The conservation of some islands off the coast of the southeastern United States in state parks has been a crucial step in protecting and studying the unique ecosystems found there. These islands are home to species adapted to specific conditions, with the biodiversity not found on the mainland due to geographic isolation. Designating these areas as state parks allows for both environmental conservation and scientific research that provides valuable information on the effects of climate change, sea level rise, and the resilience of coastal habitats. A top conservation priority is to limit urban development on these islands, as their attractiveness as high-value real estate makes them target for developers. Real estate expansion could devastate these fragile habitats, eliminating critical areas for wildlife, especially the migratory birds and endemic species that rely on these environments to survive. Protecting these islands not only preserves their ecological value, but also provides opportunities for education and responsible recreation, fostering a greater appreciation for the need to conserve these landscapes before they are irreversibly lost.